Like you, when I was younger, I always knew that I could create anything, didn't know it was called law of attraction. It was just, I was lucky, or what I believed I could get. And as I've got older, I've realized that there is real science behind this law of attraction. Thoughts are magnets, and you can attract anything. And essentially, I put it down to this: if you want to attract somebody, then you will cross paths somehow. If you want to attract wealth, then wealth is created by someone in some form. So you attract that person, and then they give you an opportunity to create that wealth. Everything can be attracted. It's just, how can I make money through this guy? Make it. How can I make money through this guy? Make it. How can I make money through this guy? You keep going up that scale of attracting somebody who you can exchange services with, and they will give you an opportunity to make money. And before you know it, you're making millions and billions trading services with people at the top who are also making millions and billions.
I love what you're saying. And one thing that I always add to that is that, yes, we live in this system. I call it the matrix. And the system is based on exchange. And there's a spectrum of vibration, on every topic. So on the topic of money, you're going to have people that believe the system is bad and evil and wrong. And you're going to have people that just believe that it's a wonderful system. They're just not worthy of it. And you're going to have the people at the top of what I call the abundance pyramid that get all of it. They believe they're worthy of it. They believe it flows easily to them. But the difference between the people at the very top of this pyramid is they love the system. In our judgment, you can't be at the top of the pyramid and judge the pyramid.
As I'm getting older in life, I'm realizing that there's only two main things that really have any importance when push comes to shove, and that is family and health. And so often, especially with me being an entrepreneur, I chased money my whole life. And the more I chased money, the more I focused on materialistic things. And I started to not focus on the things that actually matter, such as what's actually at home waiting for you. And the book, The Alchemist, essentially is a story of this young man chasing the gold. And then along the way, he meets all these people. And essentially, he goes back to his flock of sheep, meaning you can have goals and ambitions and have dreams, but never forget what's important, what the basics of life are. Never forget what you already had and what you have and what's always going to be there, which is just what you see around you. And that's the phase that I am in my life, where I'm 30 and I need money to have the modern life, a house, a car, etc. But because deep down, I'm a very non-materialistic, spiritual person. I don't want any of this stuff, but I find myself still having to find a way to make money in this world because that's how the world works. And my lesson is just don't focus on money too much, and remember that health and family is number one when push comes to shove.
So I love that you're getting this at 30, because I didn't get all of that until I was 41. I created a little longer period of learning for myself before I understood that just because we know how to manifest money, that's not the answer to everything. And that really began my awakening, my real awakening. As a child, I was definitely awake as a child, and that's what I call the stream. What I channel now has been with me my whole life. I think we all have this. We all have this higher self, inner knowing in us, but I think that society largely works it out of us. Traditions and cultures and religion and things like that. And that didn't happen to me as a child. I had all of this knowledge as a child because my parents were very disconnected. But my ego saw the kids in town that had more money than me having all the fun stuff, and I wasn't experiencing that. And so my ego merged with my higher self, as they do. And my ego discerned the preference to, hey, we know how to manifest money. I understood the law of attraction in 1982. It seems like centuries ago, right? For you. 1982. I didn't know what it was called. I don't think anybody called it law of attraction. I don't, and you know, there's some books that were certainly written on the subject before that, but I don't think that term was actually used. So I remember telling my older brother, Doug, 1982, that I know our cousins and our friends and all these people in our hometown have all this fun stuff. All we have to do is believe that we have it too, and that we're worthy of it, and that it's already ours, and it will happen. And that worked. And it was great. You know, as a kid, you love manifesting material stuff. As a teenager, I absolutely did. And then I got into my 20s, and it was still fun. In my 30s, it stopped being fun. And I needed the whole decade, I guess, to figure out that, hey, there's more to what's going on here than just the material stuff. Material stuff's not bad. We shouldn't judge it, but there's more. We've been sold this idea that materialism is our new god.
Yeah, it's like we are told that we need to leave school and get on the housing ladder, get a house. And what does that require? It requires to get a credit score because the banks don't trust you. How do you get a credit score? You get a credit card. So now the banks make an interest. And when you're that young, you're just thinking, fuck, I've got all this money. I'm just going to go spend it on clothes and clubbing. And you don't really understand that there's going to be consequences down the line. And then you put all your money in the bank, they invest it. If they lose it, tough shit. And then you get given a house. And then if you can't pay the bills, then you end up still owing the debt, and they take your house away and you're homeless. And that's what we're taught. And how do we do that? Well, you need money, get a job to pay for this stream. And it's this cycle. And because I'm 30 and everyone my age pretty much now has a house and is starting to get a family, I'm seeing the trap. I'm seeing the patterns. I can't stop people from doing it because that's the norm. That's what people are going to do. But I'm seeing the patterns. I'm seeing the stress kick in. I'm seeing the adult responsibilities of people my age who, even 4 years ago, going clubbing and free spirited and no fucks in the world to give, no responsibility. And I'm seeing them crumble. And I'm seeing how they're not equipped to deal with this pressure that they weren't even thinking about. They were thinking about the positives and the house and the dog and everything like that. And then they don't see what's coming. And like you, when I was younger, I always knew that I could create anything. Didn't know it was called law of attraction. It was just, I was lucky, or what I believed I could get. And as I've got older, I've realized that there is real science behind this law of attraction. Thoughts are magnets and you can attract anything. And essentially, I put it down to this. If you want to attract somebody, then you will cross paths somehow. If you want to attract wealth, then wealth is created by someone in some form. So you attract that person, and then they give you an opportunity to create that wealth. Again, so it all comes down to attracting people. If money comes through the people, and you can attract people such as your friend from school driving past the petrol station, everything can be attracted. It's just, how can I make money through this guy? Make it. How can I make money through this guy? Make it. How can I make money through this guy? You keep going up that scale of attracting somebody who you can exchange services with, then they will give you an opportunity to make money. And before you know it, you're making millions and billions trading services with people at the top who are also making millions and billions.
Well, one thing I love what you're saying. And one thing that I always add to that is that, yes, we live in this system. I call it the matrix, you know, not about the sci-fi movie, but just, I call this just the matrix of human belief. And the system is based on exchange. And there's a spectrum of vibration, you know, on every topic. So on the topic of money, you're going to have people that believe the system is bad and evil and wrong. And you're going to have people that just believe that it's a wonderful system. They're just not worthy of it. And you're going to have the people at the top of what I call the abundance pyramid that get all of it. They believe they're worthy of it. They believe it flows easily to them. But the difference between the people at the very top of this pyramid is they love the system. And sometimes when and I didn't hear this from you, and I like that, you were just saying this is just how the system is. It wasn't, we're victims of it, we're slaves to it, it's terrible, it's awful. Because when we start that judgment of something, regardless of what the topic is, we're creating more of it. So we're absolutely drawing ourselves down the pyramid in our judgment. You can't be at the top of the pyramid and judge the pyramid. What you're offering, Oliver, is that your clarity. You're seeing it clearly, that this is what the system is. And when you started the episode, you said, I'm doing what I love, but there's also I need money. And that's just, you know, what the system is. That's true. It's not demonizing the system. seeing it clearly so that you're not drawn back into it. Because when you start demonizing and fearing it, think about the people sort of at the bottom of the abundance pyramid, which is most of humanity, really. They demonize the system. They don't understand it. They judge it. They fear it. They're behaving in ways because of it, going to jobs they don't necessarily like and doing things they don't like to do. And like you said, spending money in the university system, spending money, on credit cards, borrowing money to go to school, to get an education they could have taught themselves online at this point. All of these things, we have this, it's like a big machine, and you can just kind of go right into that machine and move through your entire lifetime. But what I see with every generation, we're becoming wiser. So what I see in your generation, and I saw this years ago when I lived in San Francisco, I was the oldest guy in the building. And I remember thinking, all these young kids, they're just playing and I'm in a damn suit, driving and commuting and doing all of this stuff. And then it dawned on me, yes, this generation is not going to do the things that we did because we discerned a different preference. You are born up to speed with the time that you project into. And as such, in certain ways, you do get wiser with age, but I think every generation gets wiser. That's why the youngest generation, that's the generations coming of age right now, 20s and 30s, I see how they don't want to be part of the corporate matrix. They don't want to be part of the debt matrix anymore. Don't even want to be part of the gender matrix in a lot of cases. And that's really interesting to me, that there's this much evolution in just a couple of generations. And that's why there's always this generation gap of understanding, because the older you get, the more you sort of disconnect with the modern world. And if you don't seek to understand it, i.e. appreciate it, you're just going to be criticizing it. And you're going to make yourself miserable in the process.
Yeah, so I've always known that we've come from small tribes, small villages, and we started to trade in other villages. And now, rather than trading on our own, we sort of go out to trade. And then now we know about the trade in the further village. And now we're doing long distance trade to the point where we're now trading with China and America and Japan via boats and trains. And I've always known that at some point, everything will come back to what it was. Everything always has a full circle. So now we're trading with everyone around the world, and there's too many humans to trade with, and it's unsustainable. And as we're seeing, governments are collapsing. There's just too many opinions, too many, I want it this way. And as you can't blame the system. We have survived by essentially trading with people outside of our local tribes, like the European Union in England. You've kind of adapted to all this transport, and now we've taken back the control. There's going to be things that we don't have that we had before. But even though the consequences that we have got more control, we're now going to have problems in other areas. So as the world starts to get bigger, we come inwards, and it's only a matter of time until we stop relying on external people like governments and school systems and people to work for, and we just work for ourselves. And you can't blame the system, because we've got to this point because of the system. So you can't break down.
Those are very wise words, because it's so easy.
Break down.
Right. It brought us here to this vibration. Very wise words indeed.
Yeah, you can't blame. If there was no governments, then there's no police. And if there's no police, then there's just riots and hell and shit everywhere. So you can hate the government and hate the police and all that kind of crap. But if you take away that, you're left with a war zone, and all these people that hate governments and hate banks and hate school systems and all these movements and shit like that. They're focusing on one problem, and great, that's a problem. And wouldn't it be great in an ideal world if that problem wasn't there? But what they don't get is that if you fix that problem, there's now a whole load of problems over there. As a result, it's called if you don't fix if it ain't broken. So me accepting as an early age that this is the system, I'm never going to work for anybody. I understand what life is. I'm not going to hate the governments and put everyone in an Illuminati box, right? Just because they've got the wealth and the success at the top, right? Richard Branson doesn't know the Queen, and the Queen doesn't know Bieber. Not in coherence with each other to take over the world. But when you see that system is there and it's not going to be taken down anytime soon, you have to adapt to it and find, how do I get to the top? Because I can't just destroy the pyramid.
Yeah. Well, I talk about detuning a lot. So you detune fear, you detune judgment, you essentially detune your ego in spiritual work very often. And the detuning around the judgment and the fear of the matrix, because you're right, there are elements of the matrix We would not be here having this conversation right now if there were not this matrix. So it's not about demonizing it. It's about saying, hey, it got us here. Just like looking at the older generations and saying, hey, they don't operate the way I do. They don't believe the way that I do, or didn't believe the way that I do, but they got me here. They moved the needle a little bit, and then the next generation moves the next needle. So if you look at all of that and you demonize it, you're empowering it. Just like if you demonize the government. I live in the United States. There's nothing more ridiculous than our current election that's going on. But if you demonize it and say this shouldn't be, and it's terrible and it's awful, and this person's evil and this person's not, and all of this stuff, all you're doing is fueling more of that. I can look at it and say, yes, it's ridiculous, but it's a sign that the matrix is crumbling up. Governments are starting to really fracture. The monarchy fracturing, religion absolutely fracturing. We're seeing these things and we're questioning it. And the more that we understand it and don't fear it, the more it's just going to dissipate. It's going to detune itself. And these things fall away, and then we evolve to something else. And obviously we're in the middle of a major evolution right now. I think AI is a big part of that. That we're essentially talking about breaking the system. AI, we're creating something that's going to unemploy probably most of us at some point.
Yeah, so again, everything does a full circle, but most people aren't around long enough to see that, such as, global warming, for example. Yes, we are heating up the planet, etc., but the Earth's been around for billions of years. We do not know if the icebergs are melting millions of years ago from now, and there was hot summers and floods and storms and rainy seasons, and sometimes it was hot in June and sometimes it wasn't. We just don't fucking know.
Yeah, the planet's ever evolving for sure.
Yeah, you can't base.
Well, I always say too, we shouldn't have a fear tactic to not throw garbage in the ocean. It should just be common sense. But it shouldn't be all of this, the world's going to end if you don't stop. I've lived through this. I remember, fluorocarbons and all of that stuff where, the ozone layer was going to kill us all. And, that was going to kill us all. Then, there are all these other things that have come along every 10, 15 years that are going to kill us all. And they become the thing for a while. Climate change has definitely been, the last 20 years it's been in the narrative. But at some point, people are going to say, okay, we've made a lot of changes. We've spent a lot of money and we've created new industries, and that's great. But we realize now the sky is not going to fall, and we're not going to fall for it anymore. And then the fear tactic will just simply move on to something else to drive commerce. But that's, again, understanding the system so you appreciate it. You're not fearing it. You're not judging it. You're just seeing it clearly.
Yeah, it's like all these people that say the stock market's going to crash and you should buy gold, like these adverts. They've been saying the stock market's going to crash, so buy gold for each year. And of course, at some point, it will do a crash, and it will do a full circle. And people are saying, Jesus is coming back. At some point, he may come back. So you're kind of going along. And all these things are, something's going to happen. Governments are going to get collapsed, or there's going to be an asteroid that hits the Earth. All of these are real things. These are real problems. But again, we've not been around long enough to see that they come and they go. We're in the middle of this thing is here. Fuck, what do we do? Like Kim Jong-un could launch a nuclear bullet, whatever. Yeah, for the last 20 years, he could, and then he's dead. We're in the midst of a new thing, like a new virus, a new bacteria, a new species of animal that we've not come across before. And so now we're focusing on that. We're not realizing there's millions of new bacteria and species of animal and viruses and world leaders trying to kill everybody around the corner. And then that passes, and then there's another one, and that passes, and then there's another one. Then you realize it's just a cycle of life.
Yeah.
That whatever we have repeats. And don't focus too much on like the thing here, like this too shall pass.
Well, we really have two choices of belief systems, if you think about it. Either you believe that your consciousness is just this physical lifetime and that's it, or you believe there's something else, that your consciousness transcends your physical body and there's something else. And of course, from there, you break up into, infinite religions and spiritual beliefs and things like that. So there's two schools there. So one school is you are going to be an eternal being of some sort, an eternal consciousness. So why put so much pressure on this lifetime? Life cycles in this world. Everything comes and goes. The physical vehicle is returned to the earth, feeds the earth, really. And what happens to the energy that was powering it? Well, if energy can't be destroyed, the energy is not the physical body itself. So that energy, I believe, transcends. So therefore, I'm an eternal being, and regardless of what's going to happen next on earth, It's not my job to sit and worry about what's going to happen to everyone else, because we're all here on our own independent journeys. And why should I get so caught up in worrying about this one? Every day I'm like, gosh, I'm 56. A lot of people don't get 56. I've had 56 really good years and I really love life now. But if it ends right now, either I cease to be, so I won't know, or my consciousness moves on to something else. I'm way beyond believing in heaven and hell and all of that stuff. But I do believe the consciousness emerges with source, which is the creator of all things, that we are all expressions of that. And if we look at how planet Earth operates, just look at a forest and think about how you have this beautiful, lush forest, but within the forest, something is always springing up new life, and something is always dying and returning itself either through food or fertilizer for something else, right? So we have this system. And then every once in a while, a storm comes through. The forest didn't do anything wrong. The forest is just being a forest, and the storm comes through and it destroys part of the forest. Mostly it's taking out the weak branches of the trees and kind of cleaning everything out. And then all of those things, and even the animals that may perish in such a storm, all of that dissipates back into the earth. It becomes food for earth and its inhabitants. Then what happens to the forest? It grows back more lush, more green, thicker, healthier than ever because of the storm. So we can look at that and say, well, gosh, that's the earth environment. That's how earth operates in a little nutshell. So what if we apply that to everything? The storms that come through our lives, the storms that come across humanity. We just had one with the pandemic, certainly. Certainly, there are some people that ended their physical journey in that, my father included. There are people that suffered for different reasons, and there are people that prospered, and there are people that became quadruple billionaires and beyond. We saw so much wealth created as a result of that. But think about the belief systems. So the belief system, what's the belief system of the people that suffered the most? Well, we have no control. We have no power. We're victims of this thing. We're going to sit home and watch the news channel with the death ticker all day. And we're going to have that. My father and stepmother were like that, and my father died of COVID. So you have the people at the top of the abundance pyramid, Jeff Bezos. Hey, this is a great business opportunity. And in the United States, we saw so much money just handed out. That's why we have what they call inflation right now, is because we just handed out money like crazy. People are spending money like crazy. And if you are a retailer, what are you going to do? Hey, I'm going to raise the prices. Why not? So, these things it's really interesting to just understand and not judge and not fear. Just get it that, hey, this experience is going to be what I make of it, not what is thrust upon me. And I have proven that to myself over and over again in life through a decent amount of lifetime at this point, that just because so-and-so is going to be your next leader, or something may happen to the climate, or somebody is out preaching some fearful thing that's meant to scare the hell out of you, you choose whether you buy into that or not. And I've never bought into it. And I have been through recessions, and I've been through political issues, and I've been through, all kinds of stuff at this point in life. And I never chose to give it power. Whenever somebody was elected that wasn't my leader, that I chose or was my preference, I knew not to give that power. That, hey, I'm just voting and playing in the game here, and I can appreciate and do that, but I do not have anything riding on the outcome. If the person that is my preference wins, that's great. If they don't, that's great too, because my life's going to be just fine. And we all have to think like that, but we're taught in this matrix to be selfless and to think of everyone else, which is not a bad thing. In fact, the more you raise your vibration, the more you just do that naturally. No one has to, coax you to not be an asshole when you're operating in high vibration. So you do care, but understanding that all creation is thought or consciousness first, and looking at someone and saying they shouldn't be experiencing that, that's terrible, that's awful, that's evil, however we want to say it, and sending that energy is not helping them. The way that we help our fellow humans is to first raise our vibration, because we are part of a collective, and we do that through appreciation, that this person is having an experience, and it's one that is not my preference. It's one that's probably not their preference, but I'm just appreciating the very best of them. That has so much healing power, so much more healing power than that shouldn't be happening. This is wrong. This is evil. This is terrible. You're really not helping in that vibration. So the understanding that, yes, all creation is consciousness first, and your appreciation uplifts far more than your judgment of what someone else is experiencing. So when we're doing all this judgment of what others are experiencing, what are we doing? We're lowering our vibration, and then we're contributing that back to the collective. We're not lifting the vibration of the collective of humanity and the judgment of it.
Yeah, so that's what you said about when you go, I won't know. And if I go, I know I'll probably be reborn again. So basically, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a
Either you
win-win
cease to
because,
be and don't know and you're done, and that's fine because you don't know,
yeah.
or you move on to something else.
I look at death as simply going to sleep and simply not waking up. So, you know, when you go to sleep and then you close your eyes and then you're asleep, and that's it. Death only affects others. So therefore, if the biggest fear of death isn't actually your own death, but actually the death of others, then you should face death and then simply accept that death is happening. Like, you know, accepting that one day our parents are going to go. Simon Cowell did a podcast with Stephen Bartlett, and he was saying that he was very naive to think that his parents are going to go forever. And he was too busy just focusing on creating X Factor and Britain's Got Talent. And all of a sudden he gets a call that his, you know, father passed away. If we know that's coming, then we should put a lot of time into accepting the realities of life, such as death, and face it. And so now if we faced our biggest fear, death, family members dying, what else is there left to fear? Because if you're going to die and you don't know about it, or you're going to come back again, great. And the next biggest fear is losing loved ones. Why don't we just emotionally prepare what we would say to them, or go through the emotional state of how we would respond when they go? So we've already processed it. So the law of attraction says what we think we become. I grieved my father's death when I was 21 when I had my awakening, because I was in such fear of becoming an adult at that point that it felt like I was losing him, and I used to feel like he was dying. I used to say, you need to go get health checks, or I feel like you're going to die. And what that was actually was me going from a boy to a man, losing this person that I depended on. I felt like I was losing him, but not physically, just emotionally, mentally. So I grieved him, and I was basically saying in my head all the stuff that I would say to him, great father, and envisioning life without him. And then I became this adult, responsible person of living life without them, how I would act. And he was still here. But again, it's facing the things that we fear that we don't do because it makes us feel bad. And actually, to live a life solid and powerful and not let things get to us, you need to face all fears. It's the only way.
Well, that's the thing that holds us back from everything is fear of failure, fear of disappointment. And it's amazing how much impact fear of just disappointment has. People avoid doing things because they might be disappointed somehow. Yet we get disappointed by things on a routine basis because we're in a polarized environment. There's always going to be something that is not our preference going on. But we've taught ourselves that we need to avoid disappointment or avoid challenge at all costs. But we're here in this environment for the challenges. We expand our consciousness in having challenges. The storm that I talked about earlier, that storm is going to make us a wiser version of ourselves, absolutely, in this lifetime. And if you believe that you're an eternal strand of consciousness, of course, that's going to expand that consciousness eternally for you. I believe that's why we come to planet Earth and manifest in physical, in any environment in physical, is for the polarity of it, because there's things in this environment that, since we're of this environment, that are our preferences. Scenery, weather, food, sex, children, puppies, you know, sailing, whatever it is that we love and appreciate. We're here to discern those preferences with our ego and have some of those experiences. And those experiences sort of move us in a linear way through our lifetime. But the real growth comes from the challenges, the things that are unexpected, that just turn up. And a lot of times when you get into spiritual practices and understand the law of attraction, it's very easy to get into this, why did I manifest this? What did I do wrong type of thing. Understand that I have been at this for a very, very long time. I've been teaching this for a number of years now and teach it very successfully. And there's never going to come a point where you are perfect. There's never going to come a point where you're living in a state of perfection, no matter how much stuff you put on Instagram that makes it look that way. I always joke about the Instagram version of life. You know, the best house, the best car, the hottest partner, the prettiest kids, whatever it is people are putting out there, you know, that's marketing more than anything else. Everyone has their stuff. Everyone has problems. I have a coaching program, and I had someone who is a well-known billionaire come through my program, and their biggest problem was their money. We're detuning transgressors, the limiting beliefs. And this is a known billionaire that I worked with. They don't mind me saying this, I just don't name the name. That the biggest problem was, I'm just about money now, and everybody just wants money from me, and every conversation is about money. So there was a lot of detuning that we worked on around all of that. So we absolutely get what we focus on, but we have to really dig into sometimes when we think that if we focus on being benevolent, that good is going to come back to us. Any belief system is going to work that way. So if that's your belief system, it's fine. Understand that the benevolence is not a request of the universe, however, because the universe is just delivering on the vibration, meaning the universe always answers yes to everything. So if you're thinking that you're not enough, you're going to get more validation of that. If you're thinking that you are amazing, you're going to get validation of that. If you move over into arrogance, thinking that you're amazing, more amazing than everyone else, then you're going to disconnect from everyone else, because that's also your vibration, right? So we're always in this little balancing act because we're moving through polarity. We're always going to have this positive and negative sort of pull. And it's important to understand that just because we've labeled negative or low vibration, low and negative, it still has a purpose. We don't have to go down there and linger, but we're going to dip down there sometimes. And when we go down there, think of it as your time to see what's in your basement, what's in the vibrational basement that you might be hanging on to, because that stuff really reveals itself when you're in a low vibrational flow. So if we can start appreciating the storms and appreciating the low vibration periods, we really come to make that something very, very special. So if you ever hear somebody that's deep into awakening talk about something significant that happened in their lives as this amazing growth opportunity almost immediately, it's because they really understand it. They really get that this isn't a tragedy. It's not awful. It's not terrible. It's an experience that I'm moving through. And when I come out the other side of it, I will be expanded in some way. And when you really adopt that as a belief, then your life will start to transform to be that.
Yeah, in life, everyone's got pros and cons, and if people focus on the negatives, then they'll see it as victim and they'll stay in that mindset. But no matter what it is, whether somebody passes away, whether it's a war, whether it's COVID, everything creates two opportunities at the end of it, a positive or a negative. And if you keep going down the negative path, you just go around in circles. If you keep choosing the positive path, your life will unfold. Because of COVID, everyone's online now. People are making so much money online more than ever because of COVID. Zoom was created around COVID time, which means that everyone is now doing stuff online. We can now travel the world whilst working. So when a negative is created, there is positives. But if people focus on negatives, then you just think that life is this mess and everyone's life is shit. What was I going to say? My awakening when I was 21, I almost had a car accident. And it was almost head on, and I just somehow went up on the curb and missed the car. That was a huge pivot in my life where I literally should have been dead. And after that, I just felt like I was on borrowed time, and everything after that was just a blessing. So always being grateful for everything, because I shouldn't really be here, keeps me in check for always doing the thing that makes me feel good in this moment, because I know there's two paths where you don't feel good and path where you do, and there's just as many. And it's this constant habit of no matter what shit is put in front of you, there is also a bowl of gold next to it. And every negative thing eventually, once you come out of the pattern, will end up being somehow a positive. No matter what it is, everything ends up having a positive from a negative, but you don't realize that if you stay in that pattern.
Yeah, it's negative exists to expand positive. Therefore, there's really no negative. And the more, and you're right, the more we think of that way, that, hey, I'm just experiencing something right now that I've created. Ownership without blame is huge. You know, I created this. It's okay. I created it, and I'm going to experience something because of it. I'm going to expand my consciousness as a result of that. And then I'm going to move through the experience and not need it anymore. So whatever negative thing that your unwanted thing that you've created, all of these things can be temporary. All of them.
Yeah, Will Smith says, and I also say it, is that it could be my fault, but it's not my responsibility, or it could be your fault, but my responsibility to deal with this. So something happens, like somebody's left a bone on the floor and I've slipped over on it, it's not my fault, but I live in this house. And if I don't want to slip on that bone again, it's my responsibility to make sure everyone in this house knows that putting the bone on the floor is not really a safe thing to do, and to put it somewhere else. So there's no blame. You accept the reality, like you accept the world has this construct and government's always going to be bribed and taking money. Okay. Yeah. No matter who you vote for, it's always going to happen. You accept that. And then you just deal with what you can control, which is I am present right now. I can control what's around me, how I am to people, what makes me feel good serving that person. And whatever else happens, it's none of my business. But because of online, we see everything in one time now, it becomes our business. But it really is none of my business what's happening in the city down the road. You're in, say, Florida or whatever. It's none of your business what's happening in Ohio. Just because you can see it online and see what's
Right.
happening in Israel and fucking Japan, it's none of your damn business.
Yeah,
Control
well,
what
that's
you can
relatively
control
new
in
for
your realm.
humanity, being able to see what's going on all over the world and having it used to instill fear. And what are you focusing on? You're focusing on the thing you don't want. So what are you doing? You're adding more fuel to it. And we see evidence of that everywhere. You have a war that everyone's protesting. Does that immediately stop it? No, it gets more intense. And then the news cycle, what do? Oh, you don't like this. Okay, let me give you more of that because that's what's going to keep you watching me. So the practice that I teach is very much, we can't bury our heads in the sand anymore. There was a time where spiritual practices were, go sit on a mountaintop, meditate, love nature, appreciate all that is. I think that's wonderful advice if you can accomplish that. But if you're more in a 3D matrix world, there's information everywhere, and there's good and bad in all things. So social media, there's a lot of good that comes from social media. There is. I've met so many people via social media. In fact, most people in my spiritual world, I all met all of them on social media. And I meet most people that buy my book and take my course, find me on social media. So of course we spend a lot of time there. So how can you enjoy the benefits of social media, finding teachers that you like, connecting with other people, listening to podcasts, all of this stuff, without also having the infiltration of all the fear-inducing things that are fed to us all the time? Well, I don't think that you're going to be able to necessarily stop it. So it's shifting your perspective of it. It's, again, detuning the judgment, detuning the fear. Somebody wants to come on and start talking about how dire climate change is. You should be able to listen to that and educate yourself and say, okay, I can understand this on a higher level, but not assign fear and judgment to it. That's the thing. Obviously, usually these speeches and documentaries are very one-sided, and they're meant to draw you into a narrative and create some fear and, motivate you in some way. But it's possible to observe something and learn about it and learn both sides. How crazy is that? Understanding both sides of politics. I can't tell you how much trouble. I live in California. I get in a lot of trouble not taking one side of politics, of saying I see and appreciate and understand both. My personal preference is neither, but I understand both. And so when you say both and you don't validate someone's belief system, sometimes, especially with something as polarized as politics, they can be very upset with you. And so I just say, I don't give power to politics. People look at me like I have three heads when I say that, and move on. But I'm always talking, at these parties to people whose lives are relatively great, and they're sitting here fearing, something political. And I'm like, dude, you're 50, 60 years old. You're living in a couple of $1 million house, and you're terrified of XYZ winning the election. Haven't you figured this out by now that it's all a game? So, we give things power, and just understanding that everything has the power that you give to it. Healing. Yes, you can employ a healer. I think that's wonderful if you want to do that, but understand that you're healing you through your belief in them. Anything, we talked about money earlier, but, relationships and things like that, loving yourself first, because when you really learn to love yourself, then someone who agrees with that vibration is going to show up for you, if that's what you're looking for. And usually when you're not looking for it is when that sort of thing shows up. It took me till 50 to find that. So, understanding that you can't sit around beating yourself up and not loving yourself and criticizing yourself and comparing yourself, and have source flowing in the way that you probably want that source energy, that creative, positive energy to flow, however you identify that energy. I just call it all source. And I don't think it's a deity. I don't think it's looking to be worshiped or obeyed or any of that stuff. I think it is the source of creation. It's what powers the universe and certainly creates the earth environment and all of us. I just use a blanket term source, but if people have other beliefs, I have no problem with anyone's beliefs. But that source energy exists within all of us, but our ego serves to separate from it. So we have this duality. And so I don't think we're ever going to be a balanced 50-50 being. I know a lot of people think but I think that's what meditation is really about, is clearing your mind as much as possible. But remember that source is more powerful. That positive is more powerful than negative. You demonstrated that earlier, saying negative just exists to expand positive, therefore there's no negative. So therefore positive is actually more powerful because negative exists in service of it. So all we have to do is detune a little bit of ego, detune a little bit of fear, and then suddenly we've got more source flowing and a little less ego. And it's not about, your ego is not going to go away. Your ego's function is to discern preferences in your life. And those preferences lead you on a journey, and your journey expands your consciousness regardless of what it is. So the most judged journey, the criminal, the drug addict, the person living in the gutter somewhere, those people are having their experience. They're expanding their consciousness in the having of the experience. We judge it as should not be. But I always say, why bother judging anything as should not be if it already is or has been? That's just useless energy. Why not seek to understand it, appreciate it, and that's how you heal it so that you don't repeat it. Because the things that we judge just keep showing up again and again and again in our lives. And you may think that you've solved it and healed it, but if you haven't really gone and healed the root of all of that, it's going to show up again. People talk about limiting beliefs, and yes, we have those, but I would much rather focus on what is the origin of the limiting belief. Your first few years of life, when you're learning how to be a human being and bringing your own unique vibration to it, so you're not just a carbon copy of your family, what is the belief system that your ego is developing? And it's based on how you're choosing to judge your experiences. This is why two kids could grow up a year apart in the same household, siblings, and have very different life experiences and have different recollections. My brother and I, we were 4 years apart, but we recall our childhood very differently. And it's because he had a different perspective than me. And then my perspective has evolved some, and I'm sure his has as well over the years. But, that we create these memories for ourselves, and all of that history only exists as we choose to recall it. So our belief is keeping it alive. And I promise you, what really happened to however many years later you're recalling it, things have changed. Things in your story have changed. And have they changed to serve you on a higher level? I.e., I understand it now more. I'm not judging as much. I'm not demonizing my parents anymore. Whatever it is, or has it changed for the worst? Have you continually looked back at something and just chosen to keep labeling it as should not be? And our society teaches us to do that. They're a monster. That was terrible. That should have never happened to you. You were an innocent child. That was the worst thing that could have ever happened. Oh, how unfair that you were sick. Whatever it is, these little stories that we're told that hold us in that sort of victim space. And a lot of people really, really encourage that. But the problem is that as long as you're in the victim space of stuff that's happened in early childhood, you're going to keep seeing it showing up again and again and again in your life because you're giving it life. It's just going to keep revealing itself to you until you realize that one day and realize that, gosh, maybe it's time for me to find some authentic healing of that stuff. Forgiveness is part of it, but I say go to full-blown appreciation. It will take time sometimes to do that. But when you go beyond forgiveness to full-blown appreciation, deep understanding, you've cleared the ego out of it and it's all source now. And then it becomes a gift for you.
Right. That is a perfect place to end. Anything you want to promote or plug?
Well, sure. The Stream of David is how I'm really known. So it's thestreamofdavid.com, the Stream of David podcast. And I do have a book. I have a couple of books on Amazon, but the Taya Practice, the TYA Practice, is our latest book. And the audio book is coming out on July 16th of 2024, whenever this airs. So maybe it's already out by the time you're hearing it.
Yeah. And if you'd one day left to live, what's the one thing that you would tell the world?
Appreciation is everything, because that's source perspective. And the more you've got source flowing, the better your life is going to be.
Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please remember to subscribe, turn the bell notifications on, like the episode, and comment below. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's YesKingOliver. Take a look at the other videos to your side. And if you just want to listen to this podcast, you can do so on Apple and Spotify and most other platforms by going to talkwitholiver.com.